Thank you so much for joining the September Solutions session with CounterSketch. My name is Heather Kutzman and I'm the CounterSketch Product Manager. I'm joined by Tan and Andrew, who are part of our GemVision technical support team, and we're very glad that you've joined us this morning. Today on the webinar, we've got quite a bit of information to cover, and so we're going to go ahead and kick things off. I just wanted to remind everyone that on today's webinar, we're going to present you with a lot of different ideas, a lot of things that you can consider about different ways to use CounterSketch in your store and different ways to approach it to help make it successful. But it really is going to be up to you and your teams to take the information you learned today, kind of filter through, find the ideas that are going to be most relevant for your business, and then apply those ideas in your store to make CounterSketch even more productive. So that's kind of what we hope to do with each of these webinars every month. On today's webinar, we've got that broken down into 3 different sessions. So we're going to start out with our first session, which is Pinterest to Price. This is where I go onto Pinterest throughout the course of the month and find various bridal styles that are very popular on Pinterest, and then we work on building those styles within CounterSketch. So it's a great way to kind of think about how you want to approach those customers who maybe walk in with a picture on their phone and say, I want this design, and how you can then take that picture, assign the attributes to the different components of the design, and build it out in CounterSketch, either using existing models in the CounterSketch library or building pieces from scratch using freehand parts. The next thing we're going to talk about are some staff training ideas. I know it's only September, but believe it or not, the holiday season is fast approaching, and we find that a lot of custom work is usually done during that holiday period. So we want to make sure that you kind of get ahead of the rush and start to get your staff trained up and really proficient at using CounterSketch so that you can capitalize on those customization opportunities that come through the door during the holiday. So we're going to talk a little bit about some practices that you can implement in your store starting now to make sure that your staff are fully trained for when those opportunities arise. The last thing we're going to look at are a couple of 3-stone rings that I've pulled from the existing CounterSketch library. These are just some really awesome designs. I've heard and seen that 3-stone rings are really kind of surging in popularity. I'm not going to say that the halos have gone away, but the 3-stone is definitely starting to rival the halo, and so I wanted to point out some of the really flexible and usable designs within the library that are 3-stone, so that you can consider those the next time a customer comes in looking for that style. So that's what we're going to cover on today's webinar. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump straight into our first Pinterest to Price example. This first one is a pretty classic 3-stone. Again, I'm seeing a lot more 3-stones out in the market and interest in 3-stone styling. And we're going to start out by just taking a look at the design. So we're going to talk about the attributes of the design, and then we're going to use those style terminology words to kind of go and find the style within CounterSketch. So again, it's a 3-stone ring. We've got an oval center stone that's a 4-prong setting, and then there are half moon diamonds on either side of our setting. Finally, it does have a very narrow band, and it's kind of a rounded shape. It's not squared off at all. It's got a really soft look to it. So those are the attributes that we're going to look for when we're searching in CounterSketch. So let's hop over into CounterSketch and kind of get things started. So I'm going to start and kind of cast my net wide. So I'm going to look at all of the designs in the collection. So I'm just going to left click on all ring designs. From here, I know that I'm looking for a 3-stone ring. So I'm going to jump all the way over to my design element filter, and I'm going to select 3-stone rings and say OK. That will start to narrow down my search results to only show me those 3-stone options. From here, I know I'm looking for a mounting that will hold an oval center stone. So I'm going to select that and say OK. And then finally, the last option that I'm going to input is that prong set center. So I'm going to choose a prong set center and say OK. And you'll notice that every time I applied one of those filters, my search results was kind of narrowed down so that I'm looking at less options, but more relevant options to what my customer is asking for. And that's really what we want to try to accomplish when we're working through that search process. Now, in almost every style in Countersketch, we can adjust the center stone shape and the center stone and the side stone shape. But it's always easier when the preview image has exactly what you're looking for. So again, all I've done is apply filters to the library, and now I have a short list of styles to look through for my piece. This style here is a great one. You can see that it does hold an oval center, and it has those half moon diamonds already shown in my preview image, so I know that's definitely an option. The biggest difference, besides the center stone shape between this model and our image, is that it has a really squared off, kind of wider style band to it. But I think that I can make adjustments to that to get what my customer is looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and left click here to open this design into customize mode and work through the process of making the final modifications to this ring to make it look like the image that my customer brought in. So we've got our ring out on the screen, and the first thing we want to do is adjust that center stone shape to an oval, and then possibly change the size of that oval. We can also adjust the finger size based on the finger size of our customer. And you'll notice that we have some options here. So if our customer wanted to add accent diamonds down the band, we can do that. In our case, we actually just want that band to be narrower. So I'm going to look here at my shank profile width, and right now it's at the far left. So what I'll need to do in order to make it more narrow than what we have here, I'm going to left click on my options menu, and I'm going to choose the option to expand my control range. When I do that, you'll notice that that slider has kind of bounced back from the far end, and now I can left click and just drag my slider out to the left. A minimum thickness that I usually like to stay within just for manufacturability options is 1.7. So I've gone ahead and narrowed out that band to that 1.7, which again in my mind is kind of as narrow as I want to go. If I look at the profile shape of this shank, it still has kind of a really hard edge on the top. It looks more squared off. And again, in our inspiration image, it looks more rounded. So what I'm going to do is left click on my profile shape to be more rounded, and that changed my bottom profile shape to be round. I also need to change my top profile shape as well so that everything is consistent and I see that rounded shape kind of throughout my ring. And so that gives us a pretty close replacement to that image that we were looking at. Now, unfortunately, we can't see the side, so we don't know exactly what's happening on the side of the ring, but I feel like from a top-down and sort of a side view that this is a really good approximation of that design. Again, you can always go in and make adjustments to the size of that center stone to accommodate the stone that your customer is looking at, and we can also adjust the size of those side stones as well. This next style is another kind of fun one that I think is a neat style, and it's going to be pretty straightforward to build out in Countersketch using freehand parts. So we've got this nice princess cut center, and then you've got kind of a bezeled halo. It's not a complete halo because you can see where the prongs are. We don't have accent diamonds, but it's kind of a halo type idea circling that center princess cut. And then we've got this accented shank, which has this kind of neat kind of flower or petal look on the side, and then a diamond set into that petal with a 6-prong setting. So it's a really neat kind of I guess, combination of a lot of different attributes, and it's going to be fun to build out using freehand parts. So this is our next example that we're going to look at. I'm going to hop back over into Countersketch and just start a new session. I know I could go in and try to search within my library to see if I see anything similar to this. We do have, a really nice princess cut solitaire that we could use and just add the halo and the accent pieces. But since I'm going to be designing in freehand already, I'm thinking that it may just be easier for me to build the entire thing from parts and pieces. So I'm going to click on my freehand library to get things started, and I need a shank to begin my design. I'm going to choose just a really basic shank to get things started, and I'm going to bring it out onto my screen. Now that we've got our shank out onto our screen, we can kind of see what that shank looks like. A really important step at this point is to change your finger size. So if for some reason we built the entire ring in, say, a size 7 and our customer actually needed a size 6, when we go in and make that adjustment, we're going to have to move around all of the other components. And so that's going to be a little bit of a challenge later on. So if you can get your finger size right from the beginning, especially when you're designing in freehand mode, that's a really important first step. We have our shank and we've updated our size. There may be some additional changes we want to make to this shank, but for now we're just going to kind of lay everything out and we can go back and fine tune it later. So we're going to next add a setting for our princess cut center. We know that we want it to accommodate a princess cut, so I'm going to use that filter. I also know that I want it to be a prong set option, so we'll choose that as well. Now we can take a look at all of the various settings that are available. I'm actually going to rotate these into a through finger view because I do feel like there's going to be an impact as far as the look of the side of this model. We want to make sure that there's enough space for those bezel set stones in between. And this looks like a good place to start. So we'll open this design up and add it out onto our screen. From here, we're just going to drag this model straight up so that it's coming in contact with our band. And it looks a little tall to me. Like my band looks pretty thick here and my stone looks like it's sitting up pretty high. So I'm going to come over to my gem height and lower that down a pretty significant amount. When I do, I get kind of this, the girdle of my stone is kind of pushing into the bottom, and so there's just a lot going on. So I'm going to click over to my band and I'm actually going to decrease the top shank thickness and bring that down so I've got a little bit more room, and that looks a lot better. So we've kind of brought everything down at the height of our center stone and the shank top thickness, so that's a good place to start. The next thing we're going to do is go back and change that center stone shape to a princess cut. And again, it's going to be really important at this phase in the process that you update the size of that center stone, because if you don't, then you're going to have to readjust all of those halo stones that we place in our next step. So make sure, again, that your finger size is right and then that your center stone shape is right. It's not that you can't go back and adjust it, it'll just make it easier if you have it the right setting from the beginning. The next thing we're going to do is work on those halo stones or the bezel set stones around the center. So again, I'm going to use my filters to select options that will accommodate a round center as well as a bezel set option. I'm going to turn all of these images to a perspective view so that I can find the closed bezel, and that's going to be my choice for building that halo. From here, we need to make this stone quite a bit smaller, so we're just going to drag this size to the left, and we'll bring it up towards the center of our ring, and then you can either bring it to the left or to the right to begin placing it. I also know that I have 2 on each side of my center stone, so I'm going to make room, and I'm going to choose that quad mirror option. So again, I had 1 stone out on my screen. I chose the quad mirror option here, and it automatically places all 4 of those accent stones. Now I'm going to take a look at the height. So again, right now the girdle of my diamond is kind of below those stones, so I'm going to lower these stones down a bit just so that they're not competing with the height of my center stone. If I go back to the picture, you can see that these bezels have a very high or very tall base to them. They come all the way down to the finger rail, it looks like. So I'm going to mimic that styling in my design as well. So we just need to increase the height of that bezel until it starts to make contact with our shank. And again, you can kind of balance this out. We want to have a little bit of separation between the height of our center gem and the beginning of that halo. So we've dragged the gem height all the way out to the far right. We can left click and expand that range and do the same thing again. So we'll just continue to lengthen those pieces. As we make them longer, they also get taller, so we may have to go back and kind of adjust these down again. But that's starting to look more like what we want. Again, you can extend this range one more time if you want to, and have it come all the way down to your shank. It's a little bit too tall. Another thing that you can do at this point is actually start to tilt these in just a little bit. So I want them to follow the contour of my setting. So I'm just going to tilt so that we've got a little bit more close proximity to the stone. And now they start to fit in the way we were hoping that they would. So we've got the 2 on either side. Now we need the 2 at the top and bottom. We can go back in and pull out a brand new bezel and begin to rebuild these, or we can simply left click on the little menu next to the part in our freehand part tray, and then choose that 3rd option, which is duplicate selected. It looks kind of like a little photocopy icon. And now you can see that I actually have 2 sets of these out on my screen. You can't see the second set because they're directly on top of the original set. So in order to view these, I'm going to need to move them out. And now you can kind of start to see those guys come into view. And we'll move them over. And we're just going to work with these. Sometimes it's easier, I think, to work with quad mirror on, and sometimes it's easier to work with it off. So it's up to you which way you want to work. I'm going to, just for this example, turn quad mirror off so that I'm working with 1, and then I'm going to get it positioned the way I would like, and then I can go back and turn quad mirror on again. So I'm just going to try to, if I want to, I can use my 3-finger view to kind of help get the height correct. When I do that, you'll see that I lose my image because I'm designing on the opposite side of my ring. So if I want to, I can use top mirror just to have 1 over there so that I can see what I'm doing. So I can kind of pull this one straight up, change the angle of it just a little bit so that it's more facing upward, and then we'll go back to our perspective view and take a look and see how things are coming together. I probably want to rotate or contour this setting in just a little bit so that it makes better contact with my ring. And again, then we'll bring it closer into our setting. So we're just kind of fine-tuning these guys, moving them around just a little bit to get everything into position. So once we've got that one there, we can click on our quad mirror option and we've got all four. I'm going to slide these apart just a little bit so that there's not quite so much overlap between the gems. And again, as I make changes to one, all of them update. So there we go. So we've kind of got our halo built out. The last two pieces are that flower detail on the side and then a stone set into the center. So for our next step, we're going to left click on our plus sign to go to our freehand part library, and I'm going to look under floral because it kind of has, in my mind, a flowery shape to it. And we can just look through here until we find something that we like. So this is a decent option. I feel like the bottom piece is a little larger than what this has though, so not exactly what I want. This is almost perfect, but it's more of a cutout than a solid piece, and in my photo it's more of a solid piece, so I'm going to keep looking. We've got lots of different pieces to choose from. And then I've got this guy here, which looks pretty close. It kind of comes a little bit more to a point at the bottom. And the one right next to it is more rounded. So I think this rounded option with the 3 petals is going to be the best place for me to start. So I'm going to go ahead and left click here on Open Design File to bring that out onto the screen. Now we're going to see right away that this piece is much shorter and much wider than the piece from our original photo. But using our control handles, we can actually modify those aspects of this component. So I'm going to start out by just rotating this around so that it's facing the correct direction. And then I'm going to use my handles to drag this piece up towards the top of my ring and then over towards the side. So again, we're just kind of starting to get it into the right location before we start playing with the scale and the size of the piece. I'm going to do the same thing and just kind of rotate this a little bit. Before we're done, we'll definitely bend this piece to make it contour to the shank. But again, we're just kind of placing it in there to kind of get things started. So you'll notice right away, like I said, this piece is a lot wider than our original piece in our photo. So I'm going to use this one-dimensional scaling handle that's cutting across my piece in this direction to just left click and drag it in and make it a lot narrower. And as we do that, it makes it appear that our piece got longer as well. And that's just because we changed the proportions. When we made it narrower, we didn't change the length of the piece, and so everything kind of comes together and takes on a new shape. So that's looking pretty good. And it's pretty thick as well. If I hover over this one-dimensional handle going through my piece, you'll see that it's about 2.5 millimeters thick. It probably doesn't need to be that thick on top of the thickness of my shank, so I'm just going to narrow it down a little bit more. So we've got our piece out on our shank. It's approximately the right shape and size, but we need to contour it so that it's following the contour of our shank. To do that, I'm going to rotate it just a little bit so that it appears that the center point of my piece is the part that's touching my shank. So there's a little bit of a gap at the top and there's a little bit of a gap at the bottom, but the center of my ring or of my component is touching the shank. From there, we're going to left click on the blue box, and that's going to turn this into my bend mode. So before we were using our move, scale, and rotate handles, now we've jumped over into bend. So using bend, I'm going to select this orange handle, and I'm just going to drag it down until it starts to make contact with my ring. And that looks pretty good. I also need to possibly contour it to kind of fold around the sides of my ring as well. And if I want to do that, all I need to do is rotate my ring. So you'll notice that as I rotate my ring, I'm changing the direction that I'm viewing my ring through, and that bend spine changes from going kind of north-south through my piece to going east-west through my piece. And so now in the same fashion that we bent before, we're going to left click on that orange circle and just kind of contour this to bend around our shank as well. So there we go, we've got one leaf or one flower part in place, and we're going to use our side mirror to mirror the one over to the other side. From here, I'm just going to left click on that blue box a couple of times to get me back to my viewport control handles. And now I'm going to add in that last 6-prong setting of a round stone. So we'll go back to our freehand parts, look under settings, choose round because we know that that's what we want. And then we know it's also, believe it or not, a prong setting. So we're going to click on prongs and say OK. And we're looking for something that's a 6-prong setting. So we've got a couple of different options to choose from here. This one looks pretty good. It's not bad. It does have a pretty decorative basket underneath it. We don't really need that because it's going to be submerged in the gold. This one's decorative as well, but maybe not quite as much. So we'll go ahead and grab this one and bring it out. So now that we've got this piece out on the screen, it's a little large, so we need to scale it down quite a bit. It takes it down to, I think, a 1/4 carat. We'll see how that fits. We may need to make it smaller than that. So it's kind of getting out there on the screen. That still looks a little big to me. So we'll come over to our gem size and maybe do like a 3.5. We may have to modify it further, but we'll start there. So then we can bring it down into our ring, and we just want to rotate it so that it's lining up a little bit better with the side. It still looks a little large to me, so maybe we'll just go with a 10-point stone. So we'll go with 3.0. 3.0. It's also a little tall, so if we want to, we can go in and adjust the height. So we're just going to take their setting height down quite a bit. And that looks better. But it still feels big to me, you guys. So we're going to go, let's say 2.5. Probably go too far now, but it is an accent diamond, right? All right. So now that looks a little bit better. We might go in and change our prong size as well because those prongs are looking a little bit big in my opinion. So we can narrow those out and kind of play with the details until we get it exactly right. In the same fashion that we did before, we've got one stone on this side. We're going to choose side mirror and place the other one on the other side. All these handles and dots are distracting, so you can left click and turn those off using this first option. And now we can kind of start to see how the whole ring is going to come together. We'll go back just to look at our picture again and kind of check ourselves. You'll notice that this flower has a little bit smoother look to it. There are some ridges on our piece that we chose that are kind of distracting. They're a little small. I mean, there are kind of indentions here, and if we look back at our inspiration image, it looks like there is a little bit of a contour there. But when you submit this file to CAM Services, you can always feel free to let them know if you want to make modifications to that style a little bit one way or the other. Definitely. So the question was, can we do kind of a cathedral style where this is kind of coming up to that halo rather than just resting on the shank? And And so what we're going to do is go back and select that piece that we were working with before. We need to turn back on our viewport control handles so that we can grab those components. So we'll left click here on the component in our tray. And we're really just going to reposition it. So we're just going to drag this up a little bit. We'll bring it over closer to our center setting. And we're going to change the angle as well. So we're just going to tilt it so that it's going up more. Now if we look at this, the contour of that leaf pattern is all wrong now, right? Because we had kind of bent it to contour around our shank, and now we want it to kind of more slope up from the shank and kind of serve as, like you said, that cathedral from our shank to our halo. So what we need to do is change our bend. I'm going to hide our accent stones here for just a second, just to get them out of the way so that we can see everything clearly while we're doing this design. So if you come again back down to your freehand parts tray, left click on that menu, and this option here that looks like a kind of eye with a line through it will allow you to hide that part. So we didn't delete it, we're going to add it back later, but we can definitely kind of get rid of that. So we'll come in here, left click again on that blue box, and we're going to take our bend handle from going in kind of a down contour to being more in an up contour. So this is probably going to work. Actually, let's do something a little bit more complicated because I think this is a cool question. So we want the top of our leaf to contour up for sure, but if I just drag this symmetrical bend back down onto my shank, I've got kind of this little kick up at the bottom that I don't really need, right? I want this to lay flat on my shank, but I needed the top piece to contour up. And so I kind of want the bottom half of my piece to remain flat. So to do that, you can left click here, and instead of this symmetrical bend option that we've been working with, we're going to left click on that symmetrical bend, and we have the option to do an S bend, which actually pushes our design down into the shank. That's not terrible, but it's not really exactly what we want either. In our design, we saw the bottom of that petal piece. So that's one option. The other option is a one direction bend, and I think that this is going to serve us much better for this new kind of cathedral style that we're looking for. So you can kind of see here, this is flat, but from the center point up, we've got that kind of bending contour. So that would be another bend option that you could use. So now that we've got all those pieces in place, we're going to turn off our bend, and then we'll just go back, left click on our menu option again, and left click here to unhide that stone. So now that we can see it, we're just going to drag it back into position where we think it should live. And we may have to adjust the angle or something like that, but that's a pretty good start for there. So again, we're using those same components. In this version, we just did more of a cathedral up to our center stone, and we just used a different version of bend. So rather than a symmetrical bend, we chose a one-sided bend. And it looks like I got a little creative there on the end. I don't know if we want that necessarily. So you can either shrink this one directionally, kind of scale it down a little bit if you want, or we can go back into our bend mode and it scales as it bends. So we can just pull that little center flower petal down a little bit so that it's not sticking up past our center stone. That wasn't exactly what we wanted. But again, always be sure that you're kind of looking at your ring from all different directions to kind of see when those type issues come up, and you should be able to see it. So as we mentioned in the beginning, holiday season is approaching. Again, I know it's September. I'm not trying to be the person who's putting out Christmas trees before Halloween is over, but I know that preparation is really important to being successful. And so I want to make sure that you guys have the tools that you need to start to begin to train your staff and make sure that they're fully trained on using Countersketch before it's time to actually use those skills. So there's 5 different points that we're going to look at, or 5 different options or ideas that you can consider implementing with your staff over the next couple of months to get them ready for holiday. The first option is what I call a 2-minute demo. So this is essentially the elevator pitch for CounterSketch or custom design. So if you have customers coming into your store and maybe they're there for a watch battery, or they're just there to pick up a repair, or maybe they're just browsing and they don't really have an intended purchase for that day. CounterSketch is a great way to quote unquote entertain your customers while they're waiting on your sales floor. What you can do is encourage each of your sales staff to develop a 2-minute demo that simply shows the customer, hey, did you know that we can use computer aided design to create one-of-a-kind jewelry in our store? And so they can walk them through the idea of CounterSketch, they can bring up a model and maybe make some adjustments to that model, changing that center stone shape, adjusting the placement of the diamonds on the shank, all of those kind of fun ideas, and then put it on a hand using the design try on hand and kind of just giving that customer some information. This is a great tool for you to use. First of all, it's going to get the word out, right? Your customer now is more informed about a service that you offer in your store. So if they or a friend are looking to do a custom piece of jewelry, they know that they can refer that person who's interested to your store because they know that that's a service that you offer. Even if that customer, like I said, isn't interested in purchasing, it gives them a little bit more information about the services that you offer. In addition to that, it gives your sales associate the opportunity to practice using CounterSketch in front of a customer, an actual real life customer, but without necessarily having the pressure of needing to close a sale. So they're going to get the opportunity to kind of play with CounterSketch, use it in front of a customer, but not necessarily feeling like they have to close a sale. It's really more of an informational kind of sharing session. So this is just again a way that you can kind of get the word out, make sure that people know that this is a service that you offer, and give your associates an opportunity to practice using CounterSketch. The next one would be the designer of the week. So if you have several members of your sales staff, I will encourage you to select one of them each week to be the designer of the week. And the designer of the week has a couple of different responsibilities. The first is going to be whenever the rest of the staff are getting there first thing in the morning and starting to put all of their jewelry out into the showcases, you are going to have that person who's the designer of the week start up CounterSketch on your sales floor. They're going to make sure that they have a millimeter gauge, a ring sizer, whatever it is that they need in that customization space to be sure that they have the tools to be successful. And then they're also going to walk through the process of designing a ring to kind of entertain the other sales staff who are putting the jewelry in the showcases. This may seem like a really simple thing, but it's going to force that designer of the week every day of the week to design something within CounterSketch. The other thing that it's going to do is it's going to expose the rest of your sales staff to those models in CounterSketch that designer is using. The other great benefit that I think is kind of subliminal, but it still happens, is the rest of your sales staff starts to think of CounterSketch as an extension of your showcase inventory. So in the same way that we need to set out the showcase inventory every day, we need to prepare our CounterSketch design session for use with the customer. So those are kind of a few benefits. Another great thing that you can do is throughout the week, as this designer is creating various rings within CounterSketch, have them take a render of those designs that they're creating. At the end of the week, you can feature those renders on your social media pages as kind of a design portfolio for that particular employee. This is really going to help to make your employees kind of realize that they have a skill set as a designer of jewelry. And also, as your customers begin to shop with you, if they follow you on social media, they'll kind of say, I saw Anne's design last week on Facebook, and it's not exactly what I want, but I like her design style. And so they'll start to kind of create for themselves a clientele based on the designs that they create. So again, this is just another way. I'm trying to think of things that are not in addition to your tasks that you already have to do within the store, but kind of ways that you can add to or kind of bring CounterSketch into things that you're already doing so that it's not a big hurdle that you have to overcome. This next one is really fun. This is actually one of my favorite things to do in CounterSketch, and that's to actually be inspired by old inventory. So it's possible that you have a ring in your showcase that has just been there for a really long time. When I used to work in retail, we called them museum pieces, right? So it's been in the showcase, you put it in and out of the case every day for years and years, but for some reason that piece just doesn't seem to move. Customers are not drawn to it, and you're not selling it. Encourage your employees to pick some of those pieces of jewelry that they're tired of sitting out in the case every day and have them redesign or remount the stones in that ring. So you can have them go through the process of measuring the stones that are mounted. Then once they know the size of those stones, designing a ring and CounterSketch that will accommodate those stones, but that they feel may be a little bit more on trend for your area than the piece was originally. You can also do this with gemstone inventory. So I know a lot of you have gemstones in your safes that maybe have sat in those pretty little plastic boxes. No one has ever selected them or done anything with them, but they're truly beautiful stones. So it doesn't have to be a redesign of a piece from the showcase. You can just take a loose stone and actually design a ring using that loose gemstone inventory. In the same way, once they're done creating those pieces, you can post something like this onto your social media page. It doesn't have to be, you don't actually have to go through to fruition in creating the complete piece, but what you may want to do is just post the render. So here's a picture of the gemstone or the original design that we had in our showcase, and here's what we were able to create using CounterSketch. Again, great practice for your sales associates, great inspiration for your customers when they see it on Facebook and social media. Maybe they have their own redesign project that they'd like for you to work with them on. So again, we're kind of creating some marketing and also allowing our employees to practice their skills. This next one is kind of a fun idea, and to me, it's one of the great benefits of having your local jeweler, your local independent jeweler. So I've heard from a lot of you that occasionally a customer will call you up and say, hey, I've got, a 25th wedding anniversary coming up. I know I want to get something for my loved one, but I don't exactly know what I want to get them. Do you have any ideas? And so, when you think about 25th anniversary, there's probably some traditional options that you could present to your customer, an anniversary band, maybe a tennis bracelet, maybe some diamond stud earrings, those types of very traditional landmark pieces of jewelry. But I want you to, when you present those other traditional options, to also consider presenting a more personalized option that reflects that customer and their relationship. Since you are their jeweler, they've reached out to you and you probably know the customer fairly well. Maybe you know their spouse and what they like. You can incorporate details of their relationship into a custom piece of jewelry. So I'm going to encourage you again, when these opportunities present themselves, to think about the couple, think about what's most important to them, or maybe shared hobbies that they have, and then look for ways that you can design a piece within CounterSketch that reflects that relationship. and not only their relationship to each other, but the fact that you, as their personal jeweler, know them well enough to design something that's truly personalized to reflect their relationship and that anniversary. So, again, just something to think about when you get those requests, and again, a great way to practice. The final option, again, so we've presented quite a few, so if none of the other above helps, if it's just not going to work out for you that you can implement these things, or if you want to do even more than kind of these ideas that we've already discussed, consider our CounterSketch online training. So there is a cost associated with our online training. It's $495 per year. All of your staff can have access to these online video tutorials, and they can access them 24/7. So it's not like a webinar where they have to sign up and attend at a specific time. So this is, again, just a great way for you to see all of the options that are available, all the training materials that we have, so that you can access these materials and train your staff that way. If you're interested in purchasing GemVision online training, all you have to do is go to the gemvisionstore.com and look for CounterSketch online training. So those are kind of the 5 big picture items that I was thinking about when I was thinking about training staff for the upcoming season. So here are a couple of 3-stone rings that have been really popular. This is a really great piece because it has the pave band, and again, with all of these styles you can change the center and side stone shapes. This woven band has also proven to be really popular lately as well, so I wanted to present this one as an option. And then finally, we've got our 3-stone kind of more traditional style. This has woven prongs, and again, with all of these options, you can remove the accent diamonds, you can change the size of the accent diamonds, you can change the center stone shapes and the side stone shapes. In most of these, you can change the prong shapes as well. So there's quite a few different options to choose from in all 3 of these styles. So if you do have those customers coming in looking for 3-stone rings, these are some good ones to start with, or at least to start practicing with, so you can see what styles are available. Finally, practice is really important. You saw that was kind of a theme in the training pieces that we went through today, that you really just want to give your sales associates time to spend in the software, using the software. So be sure that you're carving out some time for those employees to get in front of CounterSketch and actually work in the software before they're put in front of a customer full time. And just a reminder, anyone, like the expert at anything was once a beginner. So remember, you've got to start somewhere, and using CounterSketch is going to be a lot easier the more and more you work in it. So just encouragement to practice. As a reminder, we do have a recording of this webinar. It should be posted probably by Tuesday of next week onto our CounterSketch webinar site, which is stellar.com/webinars. In order to watch the video, you just log into your Stellar account and you'll click Watch Now in order to be able to view that recording. Again, we'll do some editing of the video today, and then we'll get it posted early next week for any of your sales associates who wanted to be on the webinar but weren't able to join. Finally, we do have another solution session in October. That solution session is going to be on October 10th, which is actually a Wednesday. Typically, our webinars are on Thursday, but because of my travel schedule, the Thursdays in October are just not working out. So we're going to go with Wednesday, October 10th at 9 a.m. I do apologize for that disruption in the schedule, so we will obviously record that webinar as well. If you're unable to attend on Wednesdays, you can always catch the recording, but we will have it Wednesday, October 10th. You can sign up for that webinar now on our stellar.com/webinars page if you're interested in attending. We will do a couple Pinterest to price examples. We'll talk about some more marketing ideas to really get the word out again about the fact that you use customization in your store. And then we're going to look at a couple of library models that have a lot of mill grain detail work. Again, that's a trend that I'm seeing that's pretty popular. So I want to pull out a few examples of those mill grain detail pieces just so that we can be aware of them when customers start looking to use them. Finally, please join us on social media. GemVision this year has really made an effort to increase our social media presence. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So please connect with us in one of these various locations. We're always posting videos, sometimes images of work that other Countersketch users have created, and any announcements about training opportunities or any of that information we're always going to be sharing on social media. So it's a great way to stay connected. So please join us. Thank you for all of you who've attended the webinar. I hope that this was a helpful session for you, that you got some ideas that you can take back and implement in your stores to make Countersketch even more successful. And as we said, if you have any questions or if you have ideas for future Pinterest to Price examples, feel free to email us at webinar_support@stellar.com, and we'll be happy to explore those options in our next webinar. Thank you so much for attending. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.